Hey guys, Dan here. Welcome again to that Paintball channel. For today's episode, we're going to be looking at paint in the real world. If you recall, last time we looked at the issue of basic paintball physics and determined that no matter what we do, in the best of circumstances, up to and including perfect paint, we can never achieve uh, excellent accuracy precisely because paint can't be accurate. And it can't be accurate because of the way in which its physical characteristics interact with how it sheds vortices. Specifically, it's simply too light to overcome those shedding effects in flight, and so you get that wobble. There's nothing that we can do to overcome that. All we can do is attempt to work around the basic limitations. But now we have the additional complication of looking at paint in the real world. So we talked about perfect circle last time, truly perfect paint, the fact that it's designated for police, military, forestry service. Basically, you and I can't get it. So that's off limits. Even if we had it, it's still not perfect. It's still not great in terms of accuracy, but it's better than anything you and I can get. So that leaves what you and I can get. And what you and I can get is not so great. And in addition to the basic limitations that govern paintball physics and the flight of perfect paintballs, we have those added detracting factors of the imperfections that we see in normal paint. And what that means is really out of round, wonky, dimpled, shriveled, wrinkled, unevenly filled paintballs. And that's what you and I see. And sometimes that's on a good day. So what we need to do is establish a basic ground rule principle for having a good day. And that, that's a rec day, that's a competitive day. The first rule when it comes down to this is that given that paint is the limiting factor, your day is never going to be any better than the quality of the paint that you shoot. You can only be as good as the paint you shoot. And it really is the limiting factor. So the ground rule needs to be always shoot the best paint that you can get, regardless of what it costs. I so often will see younger players, especially, they'll at the field, you see it on forums, talking about, which is the most accurate marker, what's the most accurate barrel, whatever. And people will spend truckloads of money. It'll be nothing for people to spend well over $1,000, $1,500, for a full rig. You got a marker, you got your barrel kits, all this other stuff, thinking that this is going to help them when what they should be focusing on is the paint. Someone will spend $1,500 on a marker, and then they'll go out and go to a field and say, well, what's the cheapest paint you got? And they do so because they have this fantasy, frankly, that the quality of my marker will somehow impart that quality onto the paint and the shot of the paint. So, I think at some level when people hear shot quality, they're thinking, well, that's contributing some way to the accuracy. And so there is this belief that if I can just get that right combination, good marker, good regulator, excellent barrel, the best of the best, then no matter what kind of paint I shoot through it, it's going to be better than if I, shoot really, really high quality paint, or rather it doesn't matter. It's going to magically impart that quality to the ball. And it's simply not the case. So if I had a choice any given day between the highest end marker and barrel that you could possibly get and using junky paint, or using a rental marker and the best quality paint that you can get, I'm taking the rental and the good paint any day. Any day. And any player who's been at this a while, and certainly who's studied the physics of this, is going to make the same call. Just is not a question. You can only be as good as the paint you shoot. Just get that in mind. You can be better than what you are, but you're always going to be limited by the quality of the paint you shoot. So just bear that in mind. So what that means is when you hit the field every single day, you need to be thinking about getting the best paint that you can, regardless of price. Now, this is something also that's very important. People, as I said, people will spend a lot of money, then they'll try to skimp. You're out here to play, and a lot of times people don't play that frequently. If you're spending hundreds, in some cases thousands of dollars on paintball equipment, and you're not willing to shell out the 10 extra bucks that's necessary to upgrade you from the lower to the middle or from the middle to the high grade paint, then you're going to have the day that that you've paid for. And this doesn't necessarily mean that the most expensive paint is always going to be the best. That's not true. Some cases, really the high-end stuff, maybe they got a bad batch. Maybe you got a bad case. So it's always important to first, ask about the paint. Inspect the paint and ask about the paint, and then look at the paint. When I hit a field every time, I'm going to talk to people. Hey, what do they have today? What are you shooting? What's it looking like? And I'll just ask people, hey, do you mind if I take a look at your paint? Just kind of look at the bag. Does the paint look good and round? Are there wrinkles, dimples? Does it seem kind of wobbly or wonky? And look at the other kind of paints that the fields have. And in some cases, you go in and the fields, if they've got boxes that are already pre-cracked open, you can kind of take a look and see what they've got. So it's not to say that it's always the case that the most expensive is going to be the best, but usually you get what you pay for when it comes to paint. And if I have the option, I'm always going to go, my default setting, I just have it in my mind, I am going to pay more for the best paint that I can get. Now, if it happens to be a particular day where a better paint is a less expensive paint, hooray, it's a bonus round. But I go into it with the mentality that I'm not actually saving money by getting cheaper paint, because cheaper paint is not going to fly as well, which means I'm shooting more of it to hit my target or to have it break on target. So you're actually spending more money in the long run by going the cheap route. Get the best paint you can. So to think about how to inspect your paint, I'll start from the ground. Assume nothing on the part of viewers. If you're a younger, newer player and you're wondering about this, my advice, go in, talk to people. Don't just go with what people say. You need to listen, and you need to pay attention. Just ask people, hey, what are you shooting today? If another person is shooting another brand, well, what are you shooting? And just kind of say, would you mind if I look at the paint? And a lot of times, if you're not kind of weird about it, people say, well, yeah, okay. And just carefully take a look at the bag. Do the paintballs seem good and round? Do they seem consistent? The human eye is very accurate, a lot more accurate than people give it credit for. And you can usually see if paint is wildly out of round, or kind of look at two different brands and side by side, and one of them will kind of stand out as being a little more round. And you can talk to the field. Usually the people there will be cool about it. Sometimes they might try to upsell you, but that's not always a bad thing. But my advice, you get your case and inspect it. Don't assume that because the nice, friendly person at the counter hands you a case that it's going to be okay. A lot of times they're not looking through every single box. You get a big palette. Sometimes you could get a bad case. You could get a bad bag in a case. You need to visually, inspect every bag. You're not being rude by doing this. Nobody's going to think that you're rude. Crack open the box right there. Pull out each bag. Carefully look at it. If there's broken paint, hand it back. They'll give you another one. Make sure that there's no broken paint. Make sure that it's not all wonky and dimpled, because hopefully you've already looked at other people's paint ahead of time who've maybe been there before. Just take your time. Get your equipment set up. Go through all the other stuff that needs to be done while people are buying paint, and then you can have a chance to see what you're getting into. And you can kind of make a pre-decision going in. Okay, this paint kind of looked better. I'm going to steer that way. Then you look at your own. The paint looks good. Fine. If you can, I always recommend measuring the paint. You've got 3 different measurements. You've got your polar measurement, so you've got the seam that runs around it, and you've got the polar measurement, so that diameter, and then you've got a high and low equatorial measurement. So ideally what you're looking for is paint that has all three of those measurements. So pole to pole and then the high and low equatorial. You want those numbers to be as close to one another as you possibly can. And the reason that you want them to be as close as you possibly can, because bearing in mind that perfect paint sheds vortices in, random fashion, it's sort of wandering all over the air. When you have paint that's not perfectly round, when it's dimpled, when it's wrinkled, when it's squished, now those vortices, when they shed, are not shedding in a random way. And so what that means is that you can get forces that will sort of stack up. And a lot of times, you'll notice this when you're shooting good quality paint. Yeah, it'll kind of wander around, but generally it kind of goes where you have pointed it. But when you get paint that's got dimples on it, and we're not even talking about paint that's got moisture or whatever, you'll see it kind of fly out, and then sometimes it'll start to kink one way and then it'll kink another way. You'll have these extreme, I almost call it drunk driver paint. Drunk driver paint is a good indication that you've got dimples or that you have wildly out of round paint, because those forces will stack up. Good random shedding means, yeah, it wobbles and that's not ideal, but that wobbling is still within a relatively consistent and predictable pattern. When the paint's out around and those forces are shedding in those non-random ways, well, those forces begin to stack up, and now the paint just sort of starts driving around on its own, really veering around. And you don't want that. And the closer and more consistent those measurements are, and the less by way of dimpling that you have, the better the paint is going to fly. And it's not just that one brand you can just trust, one make of one brand. Oh, I'm going to get, this brand X and type A, and it's always been good. Well, it may be good, but you need to visually inspect the paint every single time. I've been on a field and I've gotten the high end, the highest end tournament grade paint you can possibly get, with the assumption, and I did this a long time ago, learned my lesson, because I assumed, oh, it's the best you can get. I knew enough to go with the best and be willing to part with my money, but I didn't pay close attention. I just got the case, I looked, yeah, everything looks okay, and I didn't really study it. And I found once I got it open, oh wow, there's dimples and it's shrivelly, and it flew awful. It was horrible paint, a terrible day, terrible day. And sometimes, if it's bad enough, that'll start to affect shell integrity, and so you'll get breaks in the marker and the loader and all that stuff. So it's not just for the sake of accuracy. It's an overall playing experience. You want your day of play to be good. And accuracy, yes, that's what this particular series is about. But these things are kind of related. These spheres of, accuracy and, good braking and shell integrity, they're not completely separated entities. They do have relationship. So the more attention you pay, and yes, you might feel weird asking people to just, before you go in and buy paint, to take a look at their paint or ask them what they've got. But I assure you, once you do it a couple of times, it's not that bad. And taking a few minutes, and you might think it's bizarre, taking a set of calipers to a field and actually measuring paint. But I'm telling you, take 5 minutes up front. You've got your whole day in front of you. And hopefully, then you're paying money. You've paid money on your equipment. You're paying money on field fees and paint and all this stuff. You want to have a good time. Take 5 minutes and really weigh through what your options are. Be willing either to say, okay, I'm not going to go with that, I'm going to go with another type of paint, or just consign yourself to the fact that the paint that day is not great, and you're going to have to concentrate on player skills and movement and things like that to compensate for the fact that you can't get that paint to reach out in the ways that you would normally want to do. So I think that is, that sort of covers all the nuts and bolts of this in one piece there. Now, in our next episode, we're going to be looking at barrels, and we'll probably have to take a few episodes to unpack that, because it's a very complicated and it's a very, very heated issue, and lots of debate and lots of vehemence surrounding that. But, if you take nothing away for this entire series, take away the fact that you need to go with the best paint you could possibly get, because paint is the limiting factor. No equipment is ever going to supersede or overcome or override the paint, because at the end of the day, I don't care if that marker is made out of gold, crusted with diamonds, assembled by elves in Santa's workshop. When that ball leaves that barrel, it's on its own. And it is going to be entirely governed by physics, not how much money you spent on your equipment. So the ball is the only thing that is truly accurate or not accurate in terms of the physics of the equation. The equipment is good, and that can help, but it helps by way of not limiting further the setbacks that the paint already has. Paint has a tough life as it is. We don't want to give it additional burdens, and that's where a lot of that equipment and the training and skill sets come into it. So we'll get to those in future episodes. For now, I hope this was useful. Looking forward very much to the next episode. Hope you are as well. Come on back. Bring a friend.